And here we are live in the Storycraft Cafe. It's your friends Doug and Hank here for another Fireside Chat where we take a topic and we just hammer each other with the first thing that pops in our brain. Not
Yeah, that's
quite,
pretty much
but
it.
that's there's a little bit of chaotic energy to the Fireside Chats, and honestly, I'm here for it.
Yes, me too. I love these fireside chats, and I feel like it's been a little bit since we had one.
Yeah,
Summer schedules and whatnot, vacations, enjoying the nice weather
yeah,
before, at
vacations,
least for me, the
COVID,
snow comes.
what?
Yeah, yeah, that too. Okay, it was nice for me. It wasn't so nice for you.
Yeah, you got to take
Hello.
a vacation. I was in a sweaty fever, dream for a week and a half. Hello, TW. Always glad to have you with us.
Yes, great to have you, TW. We'll give a moment or two, let people roll in. But the topic of today's fireside chat is burnout, specifically burnout for authors. But I feel like you can take this and really apply it to anything.
Yeah,
Um, but we're here to talk about writing, so that's what we'll chat about. Um, but yeah, we'll let people roll in. If you are live with us, feel free to drop in the chat a time when you've experienced burnout. If you're okay sharing with that, if you're watching this afterwards, leave a comment. We like to respond to those comments. I love seeing them. So always nice to know people are out there relating, because this is something I'll probably say 10 more times before we're done here. It's an average of like once every 6 minutes. But I think every author at one point probably deals with burnout.
yeah,
Like, and I should say every and probably. I think every author will deal with burnout at some point in their journey.
yes, yes.
And
I
so,
think it's inevitable at some point, um, and there's probably a lot of reasons why, and I think we're going to touch on a few of those today. So
yeah, yeah.
should be
Well,
a fun discussion.
no dilly dallying then. Let's jump into it. Let's I think the first most logical place for us to start is just explaining what burnout is. And Hank, do you want me to cover this one?
Yeah, go ahead,
Um,
jump in.
oh, all right. So burnout, I think burnout is one of those phrases that people toss around loosely, to cover things that aren't necessarily what they mean. To me, burnout is when you are more than exhausted, right? It is like, I am so drained, I cannot do anything. And I'm talking physically exhausted, mentally exhausted, emotionally exhausted, the holy trifecta of exhaustion. Um, and largely, and here's where I think people, where my definition might differ from other people's, I think burnout doesn't come from overworking. I think burnout comes specifically from stress. And now stress can come from overworking. But like how I get kind of granular with how I define writer's block, I think if you can focus in on the stress of burnout, you're more likely to help yourself than if you just think, okay, it's too much work. But we'll dive into that a little more. But that's kind of how I view burnout.
Yeah.
Are we on the same
I
page?
I think we are. I will take a slight divergence from you, but I think we're on the same page. I just might have a slightly different outlook on it, and I'll just say that when I think of burnout, my grandmother used to have a saying, and it was a biblical quote, I believe, probably from the book of Proverbs. I haven't looked it up, but just and it was hope deferred makes the heart sick. And I think when I think of burnout, I think of um, unrealized dreams or expectations that start to press down on you and make you feel like what you are striving for is not worth it. Because and I'll say this, most times when we are very successful at something, burnout is the farthest thing from our mind. It's easy to keep pushing forward and keep surviving on little sleep and to deal with a high level of stress when there is something that makes us feel like that it's worth it, like there's a payoff to it. It's when the payoff is not there that all of these emotions start flooding in. So I'm going to agree with you that I think stress is probably the larger point of burnout, but I think the stress comes from unrealized expectations.
Yeah, I think let's have a Hank Doug compromise here, a meeting
Okay.
in the middle. I
Yeah.
think because I really like that you brought that up. In that, my first thought is that when we are successful, when everything's going our way, and
Mhm.
specifically for us authors, the words are flowing and we aren't stressed about anything else, then there is no stress, right?
Right.
But or the stress you don't recognize. But then maybe you
Right.
hit that milestone where you get a break, or you finish your book, or just everything catches up to you, and that success gets overshadowed by
Yeah.
stress at some point. Or again, you finish it. I think back to when I was in school and it was exam season, and everyone for the first summer for the first week of summer is sick, right? Because we're all so stressed out, but we're
Yeah.
still pushing, and then all that adrenaline almost that was keeping the stress back, or keeping the symptoms of the stress back, is gone, and you're just
Yeah.
left with burnout after.
Right. And let's also realize that not all stress is bad stress. Some, think of your pursuit of health and wellness. You go to the gym, you put in some hard work, you sweat, you leave, and your muscles are all sore, and you feel better for it. And you are putting stress on your body, on your emotions, but it's a good stress. It's when that that turns into being overwhelmed, that then stress turns to a detriment, as opposed to a benefit, so to
Yeah.
speak.
Yeah, and I want to take 30 seconds here because we said hello to TW, but hello Renee
Oh,
and hello Ilsa. I haven't seen Ilsa in a while. Maybe that's
yeah,
just because I haven't been on stream save for a couple of events, but Renee pointed out serious burnout after Nano, which is quickly
yeah,
approaching, as we here at Dabble know. So
yes,
yes, that I think that's one of the reasons that I wanted to do, or we wanted to do this chat, is because that's coming up, and we have Nano on our mind. We always have writing on our mind. So this is something that I hope people can find helpful.
yeah, yeah,
But to your point, Hank, burnout will look different to different people because different people can handle stress differently. How many times can I
yeah,
say different? Like what burns me out might not burn you out, might not burn Ilsa out. Like there are varying levels, and some people, like myself, I like a little bit of stress
yeah,
because it motivates me. Like you said at the gym, for work, if I don't have a deadline, a lot of my work is deadline driven, because if it's not, it doesn't get done, or it gets done the night before.
right, yeah,
So I'm willing to say that memorialized on the internet, but it's the truth. And different people will have different situations where things are competing for their time and their energy and their mental capacity. And so you part of dealing with burnout, and we'll get to this in a minute, is just understanding those competing priorities and being able
right,
to cope with them.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
All right.
When have you ever had uh, a time of burnout? I know that you've talked, publicly, before
Mhm.
about, like, last year, I think it was,
Yep.
where you had really pushed for, you had gotten a lot of work out, you'd done a co-writing project,
Mhm.
and then you just found yourself kind of,
Yeah.
kinda spent feeling. Is that kind of what it looks like for you? Like, you just feel overworked, and, how did you deal with that?
Well, it's funny because I was thinking about that, and I'll explain it for everybody watching and anyone watching after. But I was thinking about that as I was writing my notes for this show, and I kind of had like a little revelation about
Mhm.
what happened then and how it's different. Because so what happened? Let me set the scene. I started a co-authoring project with another author, and this other author is a much more prolific writer than I am, can write a lot more quickly. It's his full time job. Last year, when I was doing it between January and June, we pushed out 3 novels. And that's just a ton of writing. They weren't super long novels, they were shorter than average, but it was a lot of writing. And it
Yeah,
was more writing than I was used to. But on top of that, I was still freelancing at the time. I was freelance writing for Dabble. I was freelance editing. I was doing a ghostwriting project. And so all of these things compounded on one another, and everything kind of had to be shuffled around. And then deadlines started showing up. And I realized if I want to meet these deadlines, I need to do an amount of writing that I have never done before in my life, like a week straight of 2,000 to 3,000 words every day on top of everything else. And then it just kind of built up and built up, and we got it done. And the books are awesome, right? I'm very happy with them. I'm proud of them. They have done very well. But once that third book was finished,
Mhm.
I could not bring myself to write for the rest of the year. That was June 2023. I did not start writing again until January of this year. So a solid 7 months of nothing, 6 months maybe. And the worst part of that is that when you're burnt out, you want to write, right? Like, it's not
Yeah.
like you sit down and you say, man, well, sometimes you say you hate writing. Sometimes it gets to the point where you're like, I hate this.
Yeah.
I never want to touch it again. But for me, after the first month or two, like, okay, I really want to get writing. I have fans expecting this next book. I have this story. I have 15 stories in my head. If I want to
Yeah.
get to number 15, I got to write 1 through 14.
Right.
Um, but I just couldn't. I would sit down, nothing, absolutely
Mm.
nothing. Or I just say, no, I'll do it tomorrow, or I just don't want to do it. And for me specifically, it took me enlisting outside help in the form of a writing coach, actually a series coach. We kind of fleshed out the rest of my series because we spoke about this during office hours. I was kind of pantsing
Yeah.
it to an extent. Um, and there was that external accountability that helps. Also, the financial implications of it. Coaches cost money, so now I'm putting
Right.
money into this. So if I don't act on it, then I'm just out of pocket. Um, so that really helped me get back into the groove. And then January hit, and I was just off to the races. But yeah, I'll let you chime in with anything.
I
There is,
I was just gonna say that, when you said, that even though you didn't feel like writing, you just couldn't bring yourself to do it, the ideas never stopped. And,
yep.
one question that I hear, interviewers, when they're interviewing someone say, "Where do you get your ideas from?" That is the most trite question. I loathe it, because we all know, if you've ever written anything, that ideas are not the problem.
No.
They're swirling around everywhere. That I don't know a writer alive that is not flush with story ideas. It's just, which one has the legs to, or whatever. So I do find it interesting that you're burned out. You don't want to write yet. The ideas keep coming, and you're still having
Mhm.
to wade through story ideas every day to get to your normal life, which is hilarious to me. Um,
It got to a point where it was disheartening too, right? Like, in retrospect, I'm of course happy to laugh about it. Like,
right.
it's not like, I was in some kind of deep depression, thankfully.
Yeah.
But like, it was so frustrating at the time because you have all these cool ideas and you just can't action them. There's like this wall there. But one of the things that I mentioned that I realized today, this revelation that I had, is that it wasn't that I was necessarily overworked in terms of writing. Now, I was writing more than I ever had, but if I look back on my last month of writing, and I happen to be on a pretty good writing roll right now, I'll be honest, but the amount that I've written in the last month is equivalent to a handful of the months during that 6 month span, right? And I am not burnt out right now. I'm feeling fantastic right now, but it's because I don't have the same stress. It's because things are a little more balanced. I've managed my priorities a little bit better. External factors aren't there that were there before. And so, like, it just feels good, which is why I wanted to emphasize that it's not necessarily overworked, it's stress from being overworked or something else.
Yeah.
But what
It
about
it
you, Hank?
I dealt with a period of burnout a number of years ago, and I got to thinking about it, and it was absolutely, born out of a disappointment. I was involved in this multi-author, um, series, this just kind of connected universe, called Apocalypse Weird, and it it was a great idea that for a number of reasons just didn't work out. But I had invested a whole bunch of time. I had written 2 books, was in the middle of a 3rd book, and for a lot of business decisions and things that were out of my control, it fell apart. And I had all of this stuff that I invested time in, had put other projects on hold to work on this, and it just you know, you kind of you find yourself just thinking, "Wow, I've just wasted a year of my time. I'm not pushing my author business forward because I've been focused on this other thing." And it's just disheartening, um, and what I had to do was I had to just write something completely different for completely different reasons. I started a project that was just a passion project for me, that had no expectation of finding any kind of readership, because I just wanted to write something for me. And the book that came out of that wound up being my most popular novel ever, and being the
Awesome.
most highly loved and rated by readers. And it just, I just had to just separate myself completely from the stress of everything else. And then that's where my best work came out of. And
Yeah.
there's probably a lot of lessons there. We could parse that out all day, but um and I think it goes back to that thing that my grandmother always said, that when you're living through disappointment, that is going to manifest itself in everything that you try to put your hand to. And removing yourself from that level of stress almost always brings a better outcome.
Yeah. Yeah. So now I think we should chat about different ways to hopefully recognize burnout before
Yeah,
it happens.
yeah,
And I'll cede the floor to you to start this one if you want, but I just want to say that a lot of times you cannot recognize burnout until it has happened,
right,
which is
right. And
unfortunate.
yeah, and I think a lot of us would say, "Well, if I would have seen that coming, I would have
Yeah.
taken another road." But, and maybe one thing is to, no matter what we're working on, to take time ever so often. I'm not saying to just, uh, delve into navel gazing every day, but maybe stop once a week, once every 2 weeks, and just kind of examine where you are, check your motivations, check your, what you think this project you're working on is going to reap. And just make sure that you have the proper lay of the land, that things are, your motivations are correct. If you're working on a specific novel, make sure that your genre research is on point. Is there going to be an audience for this thing I'm working on? Do I need to pivot a little bit? A little market research. If that's the cause of your burnout, um, check up where you are, I guess is what I'm
Mhm.
saying. Just stay in touch with what you're working on, and make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, is
Yeah.
maybe the first thing I would say.
Yeah. And I like that. I think a lot of starting or a lot of identifying burnout before it happens or trying to begins with a lot of reflection.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I had written down here, I've heard some people call it a body scan before.
Mm.
I'm not super well versed in, honestly, enough self-care to to know about that.
Right.
That's an area of growth for me, but, like, it involves just both mentally and physically kind of figure out how you're feeling, right? And truly, when someone described a body scan to me before, it is like, go piece by piece down your body, and is there a place where you're all tensed up? Is there a place that's sore? Is there a place that's achy? Is like your body physically reacts to stress.
Yeah.
So if you are self-aware enough to do that, and I am not, but if you are, then that's a good place to start. But also mentally, this is something I am self-aware enough to do, is just pick apart the things that are competing for your time and your
Yeah.
energy. And easy ones are your job, finances, huge one, relationships, huge one. Any other side gigs beyond your 40 hours a week, writing, inclusive in there, your house, your health, your faith, your what have you. All of these things are taking parts of your time and parts of your mental energy. And so you need to just kind of take stock to be like, do I have the capacity for all of this right now? Or is something going to give eventually? Is there going to be a straw that breaks that back?
Right.
And I think that's a good place to start. And I think that's just a good thing to do in general, to make sure that you can devote time and energy to things that need it.
Right. Right. Um, another thing that I would say, and it kind of dovetails with that, is to manage expectations. And this was something that Hugh Howey and I talked about a good bit a few years ago. Um, was that when he was writing, he wrote a series early in his career before Wool, before he had written Wool and the whole Silo saga, and it really took off and launched him into the stratosphere. It was Molly Fide and I forget the other part, but that was a series that he wrote. And when he was writing that, he knew that he had not garnered a big audience yet. But he had hopes that he would one day, and he had enough presence of mind to realize that while he was building his audience, he needed to be generating content so that when that audience did find him, he would have a back catalog that he could
Hmm.
send them to, and that he could feed this new audience while he worked on um, other stuff, and I've known a couple of authors who hit it massively big with their first book, and then they find themselves under all this pressure to follow that up because they've never done anything else. They've got this one book, and now people are like, okay, you know, uh, you
Give
spend
me
a
more now.
year, yeah, you spend a year working on this book, and then people buy it and they read it in a week. And they're like, okay, what's next? And you're like, well, I don't know. It took me a year to write that one, and it took me 10 years to get ready to write that one. So I've got 11 years wrapped up in this one book. And now you want me to write more? Like, like that's could be emotionally crippling, if you just let it. And, if you like to play that game of, self-flagellation, it's very easy to do, you know. But manage expectations. Okay, I'm writing this book. I don't need this book to sell a million copies. I need this book to occupy a space in my catalog. If it finds an audience, I'm so thankful. That's amazing. But I know that when I finish this book, I'm going to write another one. And then when I finish that book, I'm going to write another one. And then it's somewhere in that process, people will discover my work. And then hopefully I have a couple of more things to sell them while I'm working on something else. And all of this pressure is not beating down on me. So manage expectations, I think, because and God love them. We hear all of these great stories about the successes that people have had in indie publishing and traditional publishing, and we tend to focus a lot of podcasts on success stories because they're highly motivational, and they give us the little kick in the pants that we're looking for to help us make it through another day of writing. But all of the flashy success stories are not necessarily the day-to-day work that we do. And also the flashy success stories are rarely the successes. We tend to remember all of the high points of the story, and we don't remember necessarily, or we don't like to talk about a lot of the low days and
Yep.
the struggle and the wading through waist deep mire and muck that is anything, whether it's writing or building houses or whatever it is that you do. um it's easy to focus on the successes. Just remember that, and speaking of being trite, it's not the destination, it's the journey, Doug.
I
Love
thought
the
you were going to steal my cliche where I said it's not a marathon. It's not a sprint. It's a marathon.
it's that's whichever trite saying you you want to focus on, it's manage your expectations. The one book you're writing on right now doesn't need to sell a million copies. It needs to be something that you love and that your audience will love. Focus on that.
Yep.
Then, when you finish that book and you publish it, focus on the next one. Write something you love. Write something your audience will love. The success will come when it comes. Not to say that you shouldn't work the process and do all the things that we learn from successful people. You should, but just understand that it's a process, and at the point in your process that fame comes, is going to be different than someone else's. So
Yeah.
enjoy where you are in the journey.
Well said, my friend. It is. I constantly have to take myself like back a step from comparing myself to other authors,
Yeah,
because it is probably the worst thing that any human being can do to anyone else, but like specifically authors, being like, "Oh, how come they're so successful?" or "How can I be like them? Why isn't my writing as good as theirs?" There is a lot. I think every author has earned their success in that they write good stuff. They put in the work to become a good author. A
right.
lot of successful authors got a lucky break and just happened to submit their work to the right publisher at the right time, or knew the right person. So like don't compare yourself to others, because that's just going to add more stress as well.
Right. And if when you start comparing yourself to others, a lot of times will feel less than. But the other side of that coin is that you start thinking that everyone that has had success is because they had a lucky break,
Yeah.
or because the reading world uh is not well versed enough in good prose to understand you, and they're just
In
buying
proper
this.
literature.
Yeah, right, right. And well, Brandon Sanderson, of course, he had the most popular, Kickstarter of all time
Okay,
again.
we're quoting me now from this morning, just so everyone's aware here.
You'd never allow
Uh,
yourself to go down that path.
yeah,
Be happy for other people's success. Learn what you can from them, but don't try to be them. Be you,
yeah,
and learn what lessons you can from them, and be happy for their success, because you will find your own, and it will look like your success, and not just a carbon copy of you know XYZ author.
yeah.
Anyway.
And I think this is a good transition to the next point I have here, which is understand that you can only control what you can control. And
Yes.
that I wish I remembered where I heard that the first time. It's not like it's unique to anybody, but
Right.
that is one of my favorite realizations I've ever had. And if you can kind of embrace that, then you're off to the races when it comes to burnout, especially, but also success. Like you can embrace that mindset when it comes to expectations, right? You can't, for example, I can control that I can write the best book I can possibly write. I cannot control the review that somebody leaves on it.
Right.
So that the review that someone leaves on it does not stress me out if it's not a great review, right? In fact, it can be viewed as a learning opportunity in some cases, but I can only control the amount of work that I put into my. Sorry, my air conditioner just kicked on. But I'll let you carry on from that while I turn this off real quick.
Yeah, 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 obsessing over someone else's reaction to your work, other than to realize, if you do get a bad review, and that sends you into an emotional spiral, um, that maybe that's a learning opportunity to, well, first figure out, and this takes a little maturity sometimes, to understand the difference in good feedback and just emotional feedback from a reader who was having a bad day, and learning which feedback to pay attention to and which not to pay attention to. That's a whole other discussion. um but understanding what you can take from it and become a better writer, versus just throwing your hands up and say, I just give up, I can't make anybody happy. Well, put a little distance between you there, and figure out, when they say, this story has no plot resolution. Well, are they being truthful?
Yeah.
Did you wrap it up as neatly as you could, or you know or were you thinking, oh, this story really needs a cliffhanger? And that could be kind of dicey. So figure out, if it's if your burnout is coming from negative feedback, try
Mhm.
to figure out what you can take from that and what can make you a better writer, and learn to leave the stuff that doesn't pertain to you alone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd even take that and apply it elsewhere in your life as well. Like when you do that kind of accounting of the things that are vying for your time and energy, which ones can you actually control and
Right.
which ones are out of your control? Your finances mostly in your control. You got to pay the bills, but like maybe you need to. I'm actually going to leave finances alone. I don't want to touch that too much. But if there's like stress in a relationship, okay, then you need to talk to somebody about it, or you need to communicate with that person. If it's a deadline set by a publisher, maybe you can talk to them about extending it, but that might not be within your control, right? So that might just be something that you need to accept and find refuge elsewhere from the stress monster,
Right.
perhaps. um do you have any tips, any other tips for preventing burnout, my friend?
Um, you know, I'm glancing over my notes. Let's continue the discussion. We can swing back around to this if what's your next? So we've got managing expectations. What I said. Um,
Controlling what you can control.
controlling what you can control. What
Yeah.
would be your next?
I would say this is a tough one. This is a tough one for a lot of people. Practice setting boundaries in your life. That is like just sage advice, I think.
Yeah,
And thus, it's not from me, it's from people smarter than me about this. But if you can practice setting boundaries, if you can establish those hard, I can't do this, or I need to be alone during this time, or I need X, Y, or Z, then that's going to go a long way for your mental health. And that's going to go a long way for reducing stress. And it's going to go a long way for letting you write and enjoy writing,
yeah,
right? If you feel like you're just squeezing writing in the 10-minute periods that you can find, like on your lunch break, that might be the case right now. Like that might be all you can do, but that's really stressful, right?
yeah,
And that's time where you should hopefully be relaxing during a shift at work rather than trying to squeeze in more work before going back to work,
yeah.
right? So if that's your situation and you're happy doing it, I'm happy for you. But I want people to practice establishing boundaries more and setting up time for themselves and for those different
Yeah.
responsibilities.
I have written in my notes here, make sure your family understands what you're doing and get them on your team if
Yeah.
possible, which is it's the same thing that you just said, just in a different way. Um, Michael Leron talks about writing in the cracks of life, and he talked about how he will wash dishes and he will dictate a chapter while he's washing dishes. So he's finding a way to work in some writing time while he's home. But I guarantee his family understands that when dad is washing dishes, he's also doing this, and this is kind of his time to kind of be in the zen zone, to do this thing. And I guarantee that his daughter is not coming up and asking him a million questions, or his wife is not, talking about the family budget or whatever, because they understand that this is what dad does when he's washing dishes. I'm sure, while he hasn't talked about this explicitly, you know, eh, I'm sure that this is what's going on in his household. And y- if you can talk honestly with your spouse, with your kids, and tell them what you're trying to accomplish, tell them why this means so much to you. I have not met anyone yet who was not willing to,
Mhm.
um, give a little and to give you the space to pursue this thing that's going to make you a happier person. That's going to
Mm.
help you. Doug, I'm sure your wife knows that when Doug doesn't write for several days in a row, he's going to get a little cranky, and it's much better to let Doug have a little bit of time. It's going to make everybody happier in the long term. I know it's that way for my wife. She'd be like, she'll say, do you need to go for a run? Do you need to go sit at the computer for a little while. You need to go do something else with yourself. So getting everyone in your family on your team, and make sure that they understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, why it means so much to you, will go a long way.
Yeah. And I'm about to go off on a trademark fireside tangent here. But I did not tell most people in my life that I was writing a book when I wrote my first book. In fact, it got to the point where my parents, who are like my biggest supporters, and my dad adores my books. Um, I did not let them know until I had the proof copy in my hands. I'm like,
Oh,
this is my
wow.
book. And in reflection, I mean, I was a lot younger then, but in reflection, like, why? You're the people who love you are happiest when they are supporting you. They are happiest when you're happy, right? And so if I could go back, I would, sing from the rooftops, "Hey, this is what I'm doing," and everyone should love it. But like, it's weird. It's stuck with me since then that that's something that I didn't tell them about until it was a reality.
I'm
So,
gonna I'm gonna take a slightly contrarian view to that, because I think your experience with that is the most common experience. I think most people do not tell anyone that they're writing, especially their first book. And I like to think of it as the gift of anonymity.
mhm,
That no one knows what you're doing, therefore there are no expectations,
yeah,
and there are no one else, no matter how uh good natured the questions are when people start asking, "So how's the book coming? When are you?" Well, I'm still working on it, just,
mhm, mhm,
there can come a little bit of pressure with that. But when you're working on that first book, no one knows, to expect anything. Therefore, there's no pressure there. So,
yeah,
um, while I completely understand what you're saying, let people that want to support you, let them support you, let them pour into your life. And I 100% agree to that. But there is something to be said for that gift of anonymity,
yeah,
um, that maybe the proper way to balance that is only tell people that um, will support you and want the best for you. And the people that just want to see you on Amazon.com, maybe leave that for when, there's judge who you tell, maybe is
yeah.
what I'm saying. Yeah.
Which is a nice segue to my last point here for preventing burnout is to build a support team or a support system. And so from what you said, no, maybe I wouldn't if I could go back, shout it from the rooftops that I'm writing a book. But my parents and my some of my other family, I
Yeah.
would include them in my support system.
Sure.
Right. And I would pull them in earlier. And I think a support system, if you're trying to build one out for yourself, it involves both writers and non-writers.
Yeah.
And I think you need a healthy mix of both. I think writers help you stay grounded in the process because people who aren't writing truly don't know what happens when you're writing a book. Like
Yeah.
they don't have the experience with it, right? But you also need that compassionate side of it, that supportive side, that side that has never written, just to encourage you to do something really cool.
Yeah.
We have
Absolutely.
a couple comments here. I just want to hop over to Pat saying late again. Tisk tisk. No, it's lovely to see you, Pat. Thanks for
I
stopping
bet.
by. And TW is asking, what is the best channel to use in the Storycraft Cafe to vent burnout struggles? Well, TW, thank you for the stellar question. If you are a premium Dabble member, I would say hop on over to the premium chat section. That's where I like to hang out, so I can listen to your venting there. Other than other than that, I'd say cafe chats under general discussion is probably your
Yeah.
best bet. That is, I believe, the most active um chat space, and that's where you'll get the most new friends looking there and helping to support you.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right.
I've got a couple of other little practical things that I jotted down, Doug. One, um, was that writers tend to be very introverted, or at least we like to say that. I don't know that all writers are, but there's this kind of romantic view of sitting in your room all alone, pounding on the keyboard.
Hmm.
But get up from the desk and go do something else. Go get some exercise. There's something happens in my brain when I get away from the computer and go get in the sunshine and go for a run, go for a walk, just get some fresh air, let let my thoughts percolate, and just go to places that that I'm not going to be thinking about if I'm sitting in front of the computer. Eat a good diet. Find out what works best for you, and give your body good fuel, so that your mind can work the best that it can do. If you're constantly chasing sugar highs, and this is not a discussion about diet, but that I know that when I eat certain foods, I feel better, and if I feel better, I think better, and I'm not fighting depression from the sugar roller coaster, and all of that stuff. So whatever works for you, do what works for you, and be the best version of yourself. That will go a long way to helping you to put in the work every day that will move your author career forward, and help you manage expectations, and help you manage just the general feeling of well-being that will go a long way toward fighting burnout.
Yeah, yeah, and I think taking care of yourself is just, again, good sage
Yeah.
advice, but I think people often forget that writing is a very mentally straining activity,
Yeah.
especially creative writing, because you are writing about something that does not exist, so you have to
Right.
make it up, remember it, and then write
Yeah.
it, and you have to do that day after day, right? We said it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. It's, whatever other cliche you wanna use, but you have to do this repeatedly so many times. If your book's 120,000 words long and you're writing 1,000 words a day, let's say,
Yeah.
120 days of writing, not including weekends when you don't write, maybe, or vacations or time when you're sick. So the more you can do to make yourself feel good and be there to do it, the less it's going to stress you out, the less you're going
Yep.
to burn out. Um, yeah, I have a couple of dealing with burnout tips here. If I may throw one into the ring.
Yeah.
Um, I would say, and this is a throwback to the last fireside chat we had talking about the three levels of authorship. If you are in the area where you're transitioning from like debut hobbyist author to amateur author, so when you're hitting that 3 to 5 book mark, um, there's going to be this shift in your head where it starts feeling less fun to write because you're starting to
Mhm.
think about the economic side of it. Right, and
Right.
then when you get past that, you can find the fun again because you have a handle on the money side of it or the business side of it. But in that area, like, it feels weird. And so
Yeah.
I want people to remind themselves that you are writing for enjoyment. You're writing because you love writing. And forgetting that can easily lead to burnout because
Yeah.
you'll have all these stressors and then you'll think, well, why am I even doing this? Right? I'm
Yep.
making $50 a month from royalties from a book that I published 3 years ago. Why am I putting myself through this? it's
Right.
so take a second, and like you did, Hank, for what turned out to be your most successful book, just write for fun or do something to reinvigorate that spark, like start a new world or write a short story or write a chapter that's probably never going to see the light of day, but just have fun with your characters. um,
Right.
there's a lot of ways you can do that.
I have in my string of notes here, I wrote, remember why you started. And then in brackets, I said, it's easy to get wrapped up in the business of writing that we
Mhm.
forget why we started in the first place. So it's so funny that you and I kind of hit on these same
Mhm.
items, but I don't, I've done over 1,700 author interviews over the last decade, and I don't know a single writer. I might have met a couple along the way, but they are no longer writing. So take that for what you. I've not met a single person that has been successful in writing that got into it for the money.
Mhm.
or to have a successful author business. Everyone that I know that I've met got into writing because they felt like they had a story to tell. They felt like they had a unique insight into some aspect of life that they wanted to share with someone, and that's why they started writing. And then somewhere along the way they found success, and they found that, hey, if I do this thing this way, I can, sell a bunch of copies, and and that it turns into a business.
Mhm.
But they got into it because they felt like they had something to say. They had a story that they wanted to tell. And a lot of times we need to reconnect with that first love of storytelling
Mhm.
and let all the other stuff, occupy their own space. But I'm a writer because I have a story that I want to tell. And I have I feel like a unique insight into something that might help someone else along the way. And that's why we become writers.
Mhm.
We need to reconnect with that as often as we need to get a proper perspective, because a proper perspective will help us to fend off burnout, I think.
Yeah, yeah, and, this might sound snarky, but it is what it is. If you are looking to make a ton of money, don't get into creative writing just for that purpose. It
Right.
can happen. We know so many authors who have
Um,
very lucrative careers, and they worked very hard for it. They earned that. Awesome. I don't know anyone like you who said, "Oh, I want to make, six-figure salary. Let's start writing my first book, and I expect to see that next year." It
yeah,
just doesn't happen. There are easier ways to get that. I don't know if there's an easy way to get a six-figure salary, mind you, but there are easier ways than putting yourself through a decade of fiction writing,
right.
to get to that point. So,
Yeah.
I'm
You
feeling
know,
sassy today, Hank.
I think we could, you know, spend enough time on social media. There's some sort of multi-level marketing, Amway or something that will probably reap
Yeah.
dividends quicker than writing, because for everyone that we know that put in a lot of hard work and found huge success, we know two or three others that put in just as much work, if not more, and are kind of floating in the middle somewhere.
Yeah,
It happens when it happens.
yeah,
But
and I
understand why you do what you do will help those days.
yeah, and I wanna clarify, you know, I'm not saying you will not find success as an author if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to write the words, and understand if you're self-publishing, understand the intricacies of publishing, then you will find success. If you keep putting in the work, it will get there. Just don't go into it thinking this is my overnight riches story. That's not
Right.
how it works. I do
Yeah.
want to deviate over here to Pat's comment. So writing the story isn't too bad. It's the editing over and over that burns me out. Well, Pat,
Say it.
I get that.
Yeah.
It, so my best advice for that, and this is something that took me a little bit to learn, specifically after my first book, is that you kinda need to find a point where enough is enough. And you
Yeah.
don't know what that point is. Like, you can't say, okay, after 3 revisions it's going to be good enough, because it might not be. But now that I'm writing my sixth book, I do say to myself, okay, I'm going to do a revision for plot holes, like revise the first draft, make it something that I really like, and then maybe I'll do another revision after that. Then it's going to beta readers, right? And then I'm incorporating their feedback, which is another round, and then I'll proof it, I'll get an editor, and then it's gone. You can add a few more rounds into that. Like, that is not by any means the best schedule for post first draft editing, but there's like this compulsive need, especially for debut authors, to revise, 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 and it'll never be perfect. And in your head, it'll never be perfect, but you're still striving for that. Um, so that I think just acknowledging that y- it can it can never be exactly what you want it to be. It can never be 100% perfect, but make it the best you can and kind of cut yourself off at some point.
Yeah. And realize that the law of diminishing returns,
Mm,
100% applies to editing. Um, and we've talked about it before. When we've talked about little errors, grammatical errors, and things like that. That I think the statistic I've read is that after you see the same error, I think it's 3 or 4 times, that your brain will just shut off and then never see it again. So there comes a point where you can spend so much time with your manuscript that it will never change because your brain just won't see the problems with it anymore. And that's when you have to ask for outside help, beta readers, an editor, a story coach, someone like that who can take a set of fresh eyes and help you see the things that you can no longer see. And then your manuscript will advance exponentially, because you've kind of removed yourself from the equation and asked for help. And yeah, there just comes a point where after a couple of times you just have to hand it off to someone else, and that's just the
I would
best thing for your manuscript.
I would challenge anyone who's kind of in this boat that if you I'm assuming, you've done the work, you've read W articles. I know, Pat, you hang out with us at these chats all the time. So you are absorbing what we hope is great information. Uh, but like you understand the craft, you put in the work to write a book, you put in the work to develop these characters. After, let's say, maximum third revision, send it to someone else to get external feedback, and then go based off of what they say. Stop getting in your own head about it, because on
Right.
top of those diminishing returns, which is an excellent phrase that I forgot about, um, you will start changing the things that you already changed,
Hmm.
and then all that work you did is for naught, and you're probably going to change those changes again, and you're
Yeah.
just going to get caught in this spiral. So maximum 3 revisions, um ideally maximum 2, but I understand that might not be feasible for some people.
Yeah.
And then send it, get some external feedback, and when they're like, this is an awesome book, I really love these characters, embrace that feeling, because you made that, and that means you don't need to touch them maybe at all, if
Yeah.
only just a
And
little bit.
and I also think that you made me think of this a minute ago, that when you do a revision, understand what the purpose of that revision is. So, okay, I'm going to go from the beginning to the end. I'm going to look for plot holes. I'm going to not look for misspellings. None of that. I'm here to look for, is this plot thread resolving? Am I, whatever it is that you're looking for, have a purpose for that. And then maybe another pass. I'm going to make sure that all of my relationships are where they need to be. Is this believable? Have a purpose to what you're doing, instead of just, I'm just going to read from beginning to end, and anything I find, I'm just going to make some changes. And then the next time I'm going to do it again, but I may undo everything that I did last time. And, it's, have a purpose to what you're doing, and that will help keep the train on the tracks.
I will let people in on a little secret here too. If you're using Dabble's plot grid to
Yeah.
its full potential, you can do things like track where a character arc, or like the beats of a character arc. And so
Yes.
if you decide, hey, I really want to focus in on my secondary character's arc, and you've tracked that in the plot grid, you're no longer reading 100,000 words to
Yes.
to hit those major beats. You're reading 40,000, 50,000, right? Cut it in half. So that's a little sneaky thing that you can do with the
Yeah.
plot grid. And Pat says here, if I'm finishing the fourth and last revision, we'll send it to a beta. That's excellent, Pat.
Yeah.
I really like hearing that. So I do have 2 more quick tips to deal with
Okay.
burnout. Hank, do you have any more?
I have kind of a wild card thing. I'll throw it at the end because it
Okay.
doesn't necessarily pertain, but I think when I kind of talk it out a minute, I think people understand what I'm saying. But you go first.
All right, my first tip. This one is kind of an obvious free pass, but we said, take a break and figure out and be passionate about writing again, but also just take a break. Like, just
Yeah.
don't write for a little bit. For me, when I burned out, I was forced to not write for 6 months. Ideally, that's not you. Say if you're burnt out, just say that's okay. I'm okay with not writing for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month, and then I'll come back better than ever. And that little break, it can not only give you some distance, which can actually help your story, but it can give you time back into your life that you can use to deal with the other things that are stressing you out too. So,
Right.
just pure time. If there's any way to generate more time, it's by just taking a break.
Yeah.
The second thing is, if you don't want to take a break, or if you're just getting back from a break from being burnt out, scale back your goals. Especially if you're using Dabble, like you probably have your daily word goal or your project goal broken down by the date you want the book finished by. Just chill. Just relax. This isn't even just burnout, this is motivation in general. Like, I was chatting with a friend and I was saying, I was aiming for 1,300 words a day, and about 2 months ago that just wasn't happening, right? And the idea of writing that much, I'm like, not gonna happen today. And she said, okay, why don't you just like aim for 400? What, or instead of a word count, why don't you just say, I'm gonna write for 15 minutes today? I'll do that all week, and then next week I'll aim for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever. Like, scale back or alter your goals to accommodate you and your mental health and your well-being.
I love that. Love that.
Okay.
So I have a kind of a wild card tip here,
Hit
and
me with it.
would this be a fireside chat if we didn't reference Stephen King's On Writing? I don't think it would.
I knew it.
So we're 56 minutes in, and Stephen King and a number of other writers have said that to be a good writer, you need to do two things. You need to read a lot, and then you need to write a lot, and you need to learn what you can from reading, and and TW sees it, of course. But I like to add a third thing to that, and that's read a lot, write a lot, and then get out and talk to people. Have real human conversations. Listen to people. Listen to the things they say. Listen to how they talk. Listen to how they interact with other people. Study people. Get get outside of your writing office and go talk to actual human beings, and you'll be amazed at what things wind up in your story. Little things seep in that you picked up from other people, that that just there's no substitute for human interaction. And what I have found is, when I feel stuck, and sometimes the feeling of burnout is just that you're just stuck in your story. You just don't know what to do next, or you don't have a clear path forward. A lot of times those things will resolve themselves just from things that I pick up, or ideas that come from observation of other people, of real human beings, and not just the human beings I've created in my mind. So my kind of wild card tip is to get away from your computer and go interact with people, and you'll be surprised at what seeps into your story, and what little story locks get unlocked for you.
Mhm. Yeah, if I may build on that, just as you've built on the great Stephen King. Uh, I really like Stephen King. For the record, every time we make jokes about on writing and whatnot, like, I enjoy Stephen King
it's
and his
it's
work.
just it, it's
It's
just
so
too
easy.
fun not to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, it's I think, so as authors, we have this responsibility to make these realistic characters, right? But I don't
Right.
know about you. I don't know like 10,000 different people, and there are more than 10,000 different people in the world to draw inspiration from. So
Yeah.
it's almost like
Or in your case,
arrogant.
do you actually know any axe murderers? We don't know. We don't know. Anyway.
Just one. No. Um but it would be almost like arrogant to think that you know so much about the world that you don't need to go out and experience differing perspectives to
Right.
inform your own writing. Even like, I write dark fantasy, it's set in an apocalyptic world, it has all these monsters in it. I still draw inspiration from real people and real places and real
Yeah.
events, right? So we need to Steve W coming in with the jokes today.
Zing.
Need a Stephen King section in W if there isn't already. Just be links to our fireside chats.
Oh,
All right. I think that is a great wild card you threw in there. And I think all three of those points combined with that wild card are great
yeah,
as well. Like, read, write, talk to people.
yeah.
And speaking of talking to people, this has been an excellent conversation with you, my friend. I
Always.
do think, are we able to let the people go and be free and write?
I think you should go and let the words fly. Let them flow.
Speaking of, actually, I will take a moment to shamelessly plug a couple things coming this week. We have, if you are a Dabble Premium member, we have a workshop tomorrow on character development that requires registration. It's in your inbox. It is at 2 p.m. Eastern time, what we lovingly refer to as podcast standard time. No, standard podcast time. Keep messing that up. And then on Wednesday, as always, it is Writing Sprint Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern. But this week, who are the hosts, Hank?
Oh, I don't know, the dynamic duo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Robert's off this week. It's he's celebrating his birthday. He's turning, I don't know, 18 or something.
Something. Yeah.
So Hank and I will be hosting Writing Sprints on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern,
Oh, yeah.
right here. So we
Can't
hope to
wait.
see you
Yeah,
then.
and what is your workshop on tomorrow?
It's on character development. So we are chatting about everything you need to know about making a character, from before you write to during the writing to just coming up with something that you love. So
It's gonna
I'm
be
very
amazing.
excited.
Yeah.
All
Looking
right,
forward.
everybody. With that, we will let you go and write some words. Thank you for joining us for this fireside chat. It's been a pleasure
See
as always. We'll see
see
you
you
later.
next time, guys.